Welcome to Therapy Cable. I'm Dr. Ihsan Garashidaki and a clinical psychologist. I would like to dedicate this video and recommend my viewers to actually watch another video that is related to what I'm doing here. This is a response video to a therapist video that exists on YouTube by Kati Morton. She has done a great job on bringing attention to attachment styles and why they are important to for us to understand, and both in terms of the linkage between early attachment styles and later possible development of some mental health problems, and also what to do about these attachment styles. It is very important. So I recommend for anyone who hasn't watched that video to go ahead and watch it. We'll put a link in our comment section or description section so you can take a look at that video. It's about attachment styles by Kati Morton, and watch it in its entirety. There are three pointers that I would like you to kind of maybe pause and then come back and see what we are talking about. So the first one that I really like the way she explained it is confusing words, we are going to use in the jargon of psychology, kind of very unusual, weird words that we use, like insecure, avoidant, ambivalent, preoccupied, all those types of fancy words that are interesting but also at times confusing. You will notice that in the video, and in addition to that, I want to bring up a little bit of a scientific background behind what she's talking about. She's done a great job in terms of getting attention to the main attachment styles and also addressing the implication of those and the need for our awareness. However, there is a little bit more to that. There are actually 5 attachment styles. Rightfully, the story of development of the attachment theory goes back to John Bowlby, British psychiatrist, psychologist, and but then it developed from there into more research that was followed by Mary Ainsworth, that led to something called the strange situation, and an experiment that was done with children at about around 1 year of age, who were put in a room with their mothers, and a playroom more or less, where they could play with different toys, and then they were introduced to a stranger, or vice versa, a stranger was introduced to them. The mother would leave the room for a few minutes and then come back, and during that process and interaction of the infant with the stranger, they observed how a person at that age actually interacts with this type of a strange situation with a stranger in the room. Out of that study, really a very interesting model about early attachment styles developed, which we are today talking about, and also Kati Morton in her video is referring to. And I want to expand on that for you to really understand why we have actually 5 attachment styles and not 4, and also what it really has to do with. Beyond the fact that it has been correctly stated in Kati Morton's video that the root of our understanding of attachment really goes back to the research of Bowlby, in terms of indicating that human beings have a necessary survival need for attachment. So attachment is kind of ingrained, and certainly it goes through stages and gradually develops into more of an enduring style. And that's where the word style comes from, because the early attachment approach and learning that a child develops with the primary caregiver would then really determine their approach toward many instances and events throughout their entire life, including how they relate to others in specific romantic relationships, including how they relate to important figures in their lives. It could be, relating to coworkers, to employers, employees, people of significance, role models, etc. And specifically how people may react situationally at times of stress, and kind of being overwhelmed by that attachment style, where their reaction is determined subconsciously by that attachment style, without the person really knowing what is going on. So it has its root causes in the understanding of the research that Bowlby really developed, showing that infants do need attachment and do develop attachment as a survival value, and then kind of live with it for the rest of their lives. But then the styles and the differentiation of styles actually evolved out of that experiment with the strange situation. Now, originally there were only 4 attachment styles, and later on, due to research, I believe at Berkeley by Mary Main and Hess, Main and Hess, 2 researchers, actually a couple who have for years, maybe 40 years or more, have worked on the studies of attachment, early attachment and adult attachment styles. They also discovered a 5th category, which is called the disorganized. So let me just kind of go through this very quickly. On the surface, we have 2 major categories. One is an organized category, the other one is a disorganized category. The organized category consists of 4 styles. One is secure, the other 3 are insecure, and then the disorganized category consists only of 1 style, which is the disorganized style. And so let's kind of now go back to the root understanding of how did this even develop. In order to understand really attachment, we have to understand 2 dimensions really. One is a dimension of anxiety, and the other one is a dimension of approachability. So if you imagine an infant coming to this world, you can imagine that as a newborn, we are full of anxiety, right? The whole world is unknown to us. It's a complete different environment from the safe, secure womb that enveloped us for 9 months. And now we are in a completely different realm of interaction, of feeling, existing, sensing. So the idea of anxiety is really a given phenomenon. Anxiety exists from early on, and it's part of our experience to really make sense of this whole world. Now, that's why the dimension of anxiety is very important, to understand that how does an infant actually resolve that anxiety then in her relation with others. So that's where the whole attachment, the crux of the issue of attachment really relies on these 2 dimensions. So I'm going to draw that, and we will also post a diagram by, and we will also give credit to that. That's not a diagram I have come up with, but it is a prominent diagram that exists on public domain that explains this further. But I'm going to start drawing it out. So on the one dimension, we have that dimension of anxiety. So this is the first dimension. On the one end, we have low anxiety. On the higher end, we have high anxiety. So here we have low, and here we have high anxiety. And again, because attachment relates to a person's interaction with another caregiver, with another person, then we have the second dimension, which is the dimension of, I would say, approachability. So this dimension is the dimension of approachability. I'm going to write it down in this way. So approachability. And again, you will see it more clearly on the diagram. So this dimension is approachability. A lot of times what you see, and it's a little bit confusing too, that these diagrams, the second axis is actually labeled avoidance, meaning more or less whether or not a child, an infant, would avoid the caregiver. But I like, and at times it has been referred to as approachability, so I like to focus on that. That makes more sense. And then think about it. We have low and high approachability. So there is a low and high approachability. And by approachability, we mean, for instance, a high approachability means that the caregiver is approachable and they're emotionally available. But the low approachability means that the caregiver is not approachable, they're not available emotionally, and therefore if you superimpose this on the other diagrams that show that avoidance also makes sense, because with a caregiver that is highly approachable and emotionally available, then the child doesn't avoid that caregiver. But with a caregiver that is low on approachability and emotional availability, naturally we have a child that avoids that caregiver. But I want to get rid of that confusing axis of avoidance. Let's focus on this, because we want to really use that word avoidance in a much more clear and concise fashion. So now let's go through this. If a child experiences low anxiety and also experiences that the caregiver is approachable, and we put that together with low anxiety, high approachability, high emotional availability of the caregiver, so an inner experience of I don't have to worry about anything, this is safe, this is secure, which leads us to that concept of secure base, where I can feel as an infant that there is this secure base that I'm acting and interacting, that I'm covered and protected by. Then we develop a so-called secure attachment. So the secure attachment also has two components. We already referred to that one component as a secure base, which means that it's a, as the word and the labels say, it's a initiatory, initial kind of a beginning ground, like a ground zero, that everything is safe, everything is fine. And as a result, due to that confidence and safety, I can actually go and explore the world. And when I get too anxious, when I get too agitated perhaps, or frightened, then I can go back to that secure base, which in this case we then relabel it as safe haven, meaning now after having experienced some autonomy, the infant can go back to that secure base, knowing that there is a safe haven I can go back to. So those are the two components, simply based on proximity and kind of a start of an adventure or return after an adventure. In any case, these two components of these two states of dimensions lead to a secure attachment style, where individuals then also, and that is what was observed in the strange situation experiment, that infants who generally have this composition of lower anxiety and higher approachability and approach toward a person, an adult who is approachable, who is emotionally available, they display this type of a secure attachment style not only with the primary caregivers but also with strangers. So in that experiment, for instance, it was observed that if the mother leaves the room, the infant would very equally, in a secure fashion, interact with the stranger. Their anxiety would not pop up. They would not feel frightened and stop approaching the stranger, but they would continue enacting their secure attachment style with the stranger as much as they did with their primary caregiver. or at least close enough if it is not exactly the same amount and intensity. Now, let's move on with the rest of the quadrants. So there are 4 quadrants, therefore 4 attachment styles within the organized category, because, and that is the thing, because we have these 2 dimensions, they are regarded as organized. So with organization, what we mean is predictability. Because they are following and compliant with a certain order of 2 dimensions of human functioning, we can also predict things. Versus the other category that is disorganized, it's no longer possible to actually predict the behavior and the attachment and reactions of that infant or an individual. That's the main differentiation. Here we have predictability due to the organization. The other category, we don't have predictability and reliability due to lack of the organization. So within this organized model and 4 attachment styles, we covered attachment style number 1, secure attachment. Now the other 3 are regarded as insecure within this organized category. The lower left quadrant, as we're looking at it, we have a low anxiety and then low approachability. So if you think about it, there is a sense of kind of a disengagement. The person is kind of low in anxiety. The infant is not really experiencing much anxiety, but also they are not feeling like they can approach the caregiver. So in their opinion or in their sensation or experience, they have to avoid that person. They don't approach this individual because they may believe that this person is emotionally not available. So here basically we have that avoidant. That's where we get the avoidant style, which is the insecure style. Now if we follow that road, we have high anxiety and low approachability. So if we have high anxiety and low approachability, we have the more or less the style of the what is called ambivalent, if you will, fearful avoidant. It could be the fearful avoidant. So this is the avoidant with low anxiety, this is avoidant with high anxiety. But both of these situations, the infant is avoiding the unavailable, emotionally unavailable caregiver. So and these are exchangeable, I would say, interchangeable terms, due to the fact that more or less there is a distinction between early child attachment style and then adult attachment style. There are all kinds of terms and labels that are being thrown out there, especially also as these models have been developed over years, at least 30 years in construction, and therefore many different labels have been used. So I don't want to really confuse you even further with throwing all these other labels. I want to just focus on the concept. So here I'm going to just write down the ambivalent slash fearful avoidant. And for the simplicity purposes, both of these are avoidant. Why? Because of that really low intensity of that dimension of approachability. Now here we have a high dimension, high intensity on the dimension of approachability. So if within that high level of approachability a person has low anxiety, they have a secure attachment. However, if they're high anxiety, they're highly anxious and want to approach the person and more or less become kind of glued to that caregiver, become very clingy, and they are inconsolable, we cannot really separate them. There is a lot of separation anxiety that exists here that is uncontrollable. Then we are really talking about that sense of preoccupation. preoccupied, stressed type of a child. So, and that is also insecure. So what I'm going to go through here is number 1 is the secure, number 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4 are insecure attachment styles. And we'll also talk about how these really play out in stressful situations and relationships. And so this entire category is the organized category. Now let's talk a little bit about the implications of these styles in the in relationships. When children grow up and they actually engage with other individuals, we see, and especially in later on in romantic relationships and kind of intimate relationships, we see these attachment styles act out and or reenacted, and it can have quite detrimental effects on the relationship and on the perception of the individuals, and that's the most important part of it. I think in the clip that I mentioned to you with Kati Morton, she does relate some of these to certain disorders that develop, such as oppositional defiant disorder and conduct disorder, which is what I would like to suggest is that, again, due to Mary Main and Eric Hess, I believe, research from Berkeley, they have actually found out that the conduct disorder and oppositional disorder and actually antisocial behavior and more I would say the research they have done is based on a lot of individuals who have been incarcerated. So the state or status of incarceration, individual criminal behavior, actually has been linked to disorganized attachment styles. And again, the disorganized attachment styles are the ones that are all over the place. It's really impossible for us to kind of predict and create any reliable way of foreseeing how a person may react in a certain situation. And as a result, they tend to have a lot of problems, a lot of serious problems in their lives without regard for consequences. And so we find a high prevalence of disorganized attachment style with the conduct disorder and oppositional disorder and antisocial behavior and incarceration. However, the rest of these, the organized attachment styles, have more or less correlation with incarceration and more correlation with perhaps I would say certainly mental health problems such as anxiety, depression, perhaps some PTSD, and also some personality styles such as borderline personality and or at times also avoidant, dependent, and perhaps other clusters as well. But then, as you may know, there is very hard to establish causation. There's a lot of correlation all over the place. I don't really want to get into that because I think what is most helpful is to recognize the bigger picture here, that generally attachment styles are affecting our interactions with people rather than just labeling us or labeling these interactions. So I want to get into that part where specifically this organized category and the insecure attachment styles are actually affecting the way individuals may come across to one another, and without really knowing the root causes or the depth of what is going on in a person. To give you an example, we have a lot of times couples who display this type of paradoxical opposite attachment styles. We have a lot of times one person in the coupledom who comes in with highly the anxious preoccupied. That's this category, anxious preoccupied attachment style, and they are coupled with someone kind of from the opposite category, usually from the avoidant attachment style, sometimes low anxiety, sometimes high anxiety. So it could be the fearful anxious, or the fearful avoidant, or it could be from the less fearful or fearless kind of avoidant. And interestingly, what happens is that within their presentations, there's a very interesting dynamic that goes on between them, which is they first of all trigger each other. If you think about it, that because and I will create another video on that where we go in depth. I don't want to spend too much time on that. I want to just dedicate another video, but just on the surface, very quick markers of these types of a paradoxical opposite attachment style relationship is that the anxious person is highly kind of clingy. They cannot calm down by themselves. So what they do, just like we have seen in that strange situation, an infant depending on an adult to regulate, self-soothe and self-regulate this infant, because the child cannot. They haven't learned how to calm down themselves as much as a secure child has learned that. So there's dependency and codependency on another individual to calm them down is obvious in adult relationships with that type of a combination that I mentioned, where one side of the couple is highly anxious. They cannot settle down. They for instance get into these arguments and debates and long drawn conversations where they have to immediately arrive at a resolution or they are completely upset, and then that is where we at times see perhaps those signs of borderline personality, where they may end up making rash judgments, think black and white, approach life in very extreme all or none thinking. So if they cannot settle and resolve this dispute, then the whole relationship is over or has to be over, and they tend to gravitate toward a breakup, again because in their mind there is only one of two ways. One is either this codependent soothing mechanism where they can only calm themselves down with the help of the partner and with the agreement of the partner and with the kind of being on the same frequency, and if not, then the entire partnership is a danger to them and they want to end that, and then at the same time, so now this approach from the preoccupied style is actually a trigger for the avoidant, because what happens is the avoidant styles, what they have learned in order to manage their anxiety is that they tend to see interactions with individuals as source of conflict. So avoidance, what they do is they look at the situation that they're within which they're interacting with another person who is unapproachable as something that is kind of hopeless. They think to themselves, why even engage? Why even go there into this approachability when this other person is not approachable or emotionally available? So it's not only relationships, but certainly the core issue of it is that they believe that every relationship, every kind of a commotion, every disagreement, every type of a more or less mismatch of thoughts, ideas, of opinions is going to lead to a major conflict, and therefore it's better not even to start with it. Now, this person, the other partner who has avoidant attachment style is triggered in the sense of this clinginess and this codependency coming from the other partner with this highly anxious, preoccupied attachment need, even further, because that creates more anxiety, that creates more conflict, that creates more opportunity for clashing and for friction. So it triggers them to go even deeper into their avoidant style. So, or in other words, what you can observe is that their avoidant style is activated, and you see this partner just kind of walk away, despite knowing that their partner needs some soothing, some attention, some caring behaviors, and that is what would calm them down. Despite knowing that their subconsciously their attachment style is activated and pulls them away from this situation. It's kind of paradoxical, because when you open this up and people start talking to each other, one person may say, well, what I need from you is to be there for me, where I can kind of lean on you, where I can we can talk this further, we can come to a resolution. And the partner say, oh, no, I don't want any of those things. That is danger to me. Now, they may not even articulate it. That's the other part that we see with that avoidant attachment style, that this person who is being activated, they're not usually not capable of actually articulating these inner feelings and notions and obstacles. So they just walk away. Now, like I mentioned, I will create another video, go a lot deeper into this. But this is one example where these attachment styles are kind of lifelong attachment styles that unless they are treated, unless they are attended to, and more or less converted into a more secure attachment style, then they remain insecure. And research shows actually that through therapy, couples therapy, individual therapy, even without therapy, through experience of secure attachments, which would include room for self-differentiation, for room for acceptance and tolerance, room for skill building in terms of a person just learning how to self-regulate and self-soothe, and witnessing what a secure way of interacting with others really looks like, then they could actually turn their insecure attachment style into a secure way of relating with others. The one last topic that I would want to bring up is that, and we will also create another video on that, is the linkage between how these attachment styles actually kind of overlap with personality styles and personality disorders. And it is difficult to differentiate between these, what part of the interaction, what part of the characteristic, the trait, the behavior as a person is kind of based on their attachment style. Is it the attachment style that is being activated regardless of their personality style and perhaps personality disorder, or is it the personality style? Such as, let's say, if a person walks away from a conversation, is it because their avoidant attachment style is kicking in, or because they're simply so narcissistic that they may regard this communication and conversation beneath their value and beneath their class? And they may say, well, I don't need this, it's more of an ego trip for them, versus being kind of threatened by the conflict. We will get into another video on that. Thank you for watching our video. We appreciate it very much. And make sure you watch Kati Morton's video on attachment style thoroughly from the beginning to end. It's a very informative video as well. And let us know if you would like to see other videos, other topics. We'd be glad to create new ones. Thank you very much.